President Obama leaves the Paris Global Warming Summit empty-handed, and he says don't look for Russia to come around on Syria anytime soon. This is Special Report. Good evening, welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. President Obama returns to the White House later this hour, fresh off a climate change conference overshadowed by terrorism. While the president insists a lot was accomplished in Paris, the summit will likely be remembered more for what did not happen on global warming, ISIS, and Syria than what did. Correspondent Kevin Corke wraps up the president's trip from the French capital.
Calling it an economic and security imperative, President Obama wrapped up the historic Paris Climate Summit by asking world leaders to attack climate change with the same determination used in the fight against global terrorism.
The reason is because this one trend, climate change, affects all trends. And before long, we are going to have to devote more and more and more of our economic and military resources not to growing opportunity for our people, but to adapting to the various consequences of a changing planet.
While attempting to make the climate change terrorism link, the president was forced to acknowledge the inconvenient truth that global warming or not, terrorism and war remain stark realities. Today, the Pentagon confirmed that hundreds more Americans will now head overseas to support the fight against ISIS.
We're sending, on President Obama's orders and the chairman's and my advice, Special Operations Forces personnel to Syria to support the fight against ISIL.
The move is just the latest change in strategy for a White House that has struggled to form a cohesive plan to fight the terror group. On the campaign trail, Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton rejected calls for more U.S. ground troops.
Under no circumstances would you not do that?
Well, at this point, I cannot conceive of any circumstances where I would agree to do that.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State John Kerry told Rolling Stone that the world can defeat ISIS, telling the magazine, quote, all of that can come to an abrupt end if we get our act together. But on Capitol Hill, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joe Dunford, admitted that contrary to the president's bold proclamation about containing ISIS earlier this month,
we have not contained ISIL.
Back in Paris, the president's latest meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Erdogan did little to ease tensions between Moscow and Ankara in the wake of the recent downing of a Russian military aircraft by the Turks. In fact, Fox News has learned that the Russians have expanded their military operations in Syria to include a second air base, even as the president predicted the Kremlin could eventually work with the West there.
I don't expect that you're going to see a 180 turn on their strategy over the next several weeks. They have invested for years now in keeping Assad in power.
And as if dealing with terrorism and the Syrian crisis weren't enough, the president today was asked if he was worried that agreements reached during this climate summit might be undone by a future GOP president.
You know, just with respect to my successor, let me first of all say that I'm anticipating a Democrat succeeding me.
Brett, the president followed up that little quip about 2016 by adding he had confidence in the wisdom of the American people, whatever that's supposed to mean. I should also point out we learned tonight that the Germans are prepared to send some 1,200 troops, that is, to Syria to assist in the coalition's battle against ISIS. Brett?
Kevin Corke live in Paris. Kevin, thank you. An arrest tonight in the Paris terror attacks. Officials say the suspect is believed to have helped secure lodging for the man who planned the assault and who later died during a police raid. The only other person in custody is the actual landlord who allegedly provided housing for that planner. A short time ago, House Republicans up on Capitol Hill pushed through 2 resolutions blocking President Obama's plan to force steep cuts in greenhouse gas emissions from U.S. power plants. The Senate approved identical motions last month. The president has vowed to veto both measures. We're learning more tonight about the special powers used by the federal government to keep track of what you look at on the internet. Correspondent Peter Ducey tells us about what you may consider a very inconvenient truth.
How'd you like it if the search history on your personal computer filled with revealing personal information wasn't personal anymore? Like when you Googled a former flame to see what they were up to, or the time you used a browser to diagnose a medical condition. Even that mistake when you mistyped something into the search bar and got results that were inappropriate. Well, we learned this week the FBI can access all that without a warrant, even if the user hasn't been charged with a crime. All that collection has security experts concerned.
It may be a problem that if the FBI is sweeping in all this information, they may just be providing a pool of information that foreign governments could actually sweep up and use in order to actually conduct further espionage.
The feds issue something called a national security letter to make demands about a person's locations, purchases, contacts, and searches. Service providers get about 60 every day, and they come with a gag order. But one company, Calix, wouldn't comply.
When I got to the part of the letter that said I could never tell anybody that I'd received the letter, it really alarmed me. It alarmed me because it seemed to be a clear violation of my right to free speech.
If there was a credible threat to the homeland, though, former CIA Director Jim Woolsey believes that citizens wouldn't mind agents monitoring their activity.
Let's say it's something like what happened in Paris. People will start saying, well, I need the government to protect me, and they will do what they did, I think, after 9/11, which is be pretty tolerant of the government.
Woolsey also argues that private companies like Amazon keep a ton of data on consumers with less oversight than federal agencies that do the same, but that people see D.C. differently for a reason.
So if they wonder in the government why people don't trust them, they don't have to look much further than what happened with the IRS in the last several years.
So before you search for something, just know that even if you haven't been accused of anything, your online queries may not remain private. They could end up on a dry erase board at the J. Edgar Hoover building that a group of agents are staring at wondering, what's up with that guy? Right?
Comforting. Peter, thank you. Stocks were up today. The Dow gained 168. The S&P 500 finished ahead 22. The Nasdaq was up 48. There are new questions tonight about what Hillary Clinton knew and where she was getting her information following the Benghazi terror attacks. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry tonight with the latest fallout from the Clinton email scandal.
Some of Hillary Clinton's newly released emails may contradict her Benghazi testimony in October when she claimed to not be aware memos with sensitive information about Libya she received on her personal server from controversial advisor Sidney Blumenthal were actually put together by former intelligence official Tyler Drumheller. Republican Select Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy pressed on whether the Secretary of State basically had an outside intelligence network and why she was not more curious about the source of information on the September 11, 2012 terror attacks and other matters, noting it was not really coming from Blumenthal.
I don't know who wrote them. He's the one who sent them to me.
Would you be surprised to know not a single one of those was from him?
I don't know where he got the information that he was sending to me.
Yet the new emails show on September 12, 2012, the night after the attacks, Clinton received a message written by Drumheller in which the former CIA officer declared his sources, quote, believed that the attackers, having prepared to launch their assault, took advantage of the cover provided by the demonstrations in Benghazi, protesting an internet production or video seen as disrespectful to the Prophet Muhammad, raising more questions about Clinton's role in pushing the White House's narrative with National Security Advisor Susan Rice that the video caused the attacks, since another new document revealed by the State Department on Monday shows Clinton met with Rice on September 14th, 2 days before the then United Nations ambassador infamously appeared on 5 Sunday talk shows.
It was a spontaneous reaction to what had just transpired in Cairo as a consequence of the video.
There are also emails with the Clinton camp's reaction to her Benghazi testimony back in 2013.
What difference at this point does it make?
Mark Penn, an advisor from Clinton's 2008 campaign, emailed it was a mistake, declaring, quote, looks more like they rattled you, while most other advisors boasted they were doing high fives, a key cheerleader being top aide Huma Abedin, who emailed, quote, I'm being flooded with emails about how you rocked and you looked fabulous.
Martin O'Malley jumped on a 2012 email in which Clinton writes caucuses are, quote, creatures of the party's extremes. Might not play well in Iowa, Brett.
All right, Ed, thank you. Up next, not a lot of holiday good cheer this season between Republican presidential candidates. We'll show you that. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates